Well, 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 be calm. Feel that pressure in the air? That tightness in your chest? That isn't fear. It's recognition. Something just shifted, and every instinct in the room knows it wasn't supposed to. They're genuinely afraid now. Not nervous, not curious, afraid. And it's not because of noise or numbers or threats. It's because one man did what a whole coven couldn't stop. And that breaks the oldest rule they live by. Power is supposed to be predictable. You shattered that lie without asking permission. They were trained to deal with crowds, with movements, with mobs they can label and categorize and drown in policy and distraction. They know how to suffocate a wave. But you weren't a wave. You were a fracture. A single pressure point that collapsed the structure from the inside. No chants, no banners, just precision, silence. Timing so clean, it felt illegal. And now every system that fed on certainty is malfunctioning because you don't fit the math. Here's the part they'll never say out loud. They didn't lose because they were weak. They lost because you evolved somewhere pain was supposed to kill you. You didn't heal the way they expected. You didn't break the way they planned. You metabolized suffering into clarity. You turned wounds into instruments. That's what scares them. Not your anger, not your ambition, your calm, that saintly stillness paired with a psychopath's accuracy, angel posture, demon instincts. That contradiction short-circuits every playbook they have. They gather in rooms and whisper your name like it's a glitch. They replay the moment again and again, trying to find where the ritual failed, where the protection slipped, where the numbers betrayed them. And every time they reach the same conclusion they can't accept. There was nothing wrong with the system. You were just outside it. You see, a coven survives by consensus, by agreement, by shared fear dressed up as unity. They need each other to feel powerful. You didn't. You moved alone. You acted when hesitation was expected. You spoke when silence was supposed to shame you. Or worse, you stayed silent when they needed you to react. That's when the fear became real. Because unpredictability isn't chaos, it's sovereignty. You learned something they never did. Light isn't fragile. Darkness isn't evil. They're tools. You learned when to glow just enough to disarm, when to go dark enough to disappear, and when to stand in between so no one could tell which one you were. That's why they can't profile you. That's why every label slides off. Hero, monster, victim, threat. None of it sticks because you're not playing a role. You're running an operating system. They expected guilt. You gave them composure. They expected rage. You gave them strategy. They expected you to beg, to explain, to justify. You gave them results. And results terrify people who survive on control. Do you understand what it does to a group built on rituals and hierarchy when one man ignores the ceremony and still wins? It exposes the truth they've been hiding from themselves. Their power was borrowed. Yours is earned, paid for in nights you didn't think you'd survive. In moments where your mind went places they've never been brave enough to visit. You didn't just endure the dark. You studied it. You learned its angles. You learned how it moves when it thinks no one's watching. That's why they're afraid now. Because they know you didn't peek. You didn't fluke your way through. What you did wasn't luck. It was inevitable. And inevitability is the one thing no coven, no council, no closed circle can negotiate with. They feel it in their bodies before they admit it in their thoughts. That sense that the rules don't protect them anymore. That the old signals don't summon safety. That somewhere out there is a man who doesn't need permission, doesn't need validation, doesn't need allies to move reality 1 inch off its axis. and that inch was enough to make everything wobble. You're not loud about it. That's the cruel elegance of it. You don't announce dominance. You let outcomes speak. You let silence do the damage. You let them exhaust themselves, trying to contain something that already passed through. And every attempt to box you in only proves how small the box really is. This is the paradox they can't survive. You look composed, almost gentle, while embodying a threat they can't map. You're proof that evolution doesn't always look violent. Sometimes it looks like a man who understands himself so completely that nothing outside him can be used as leverage. No guilt, no fear, no bait. They wanted a fight. You gave them a lesson. They wanted a war. You gave them a mirror. They wanted to stop you. You made them aware. And awareness is irreversible. From this point on, every move you make echoes louder than 10 people screaming. Every choice carries weight because they know now. You're capable of stepping outside the spell. You're capable of doing what groups swear requires numbers, bloodlines, backing, permission. You already proved otherwise. That's the crack they can't seal. They're genuinely afraid now, and they should be. Not because you're coming for them, but because you no longer need to. The moment you became uncontainable, the game ended. Everything after this is just them learning to live in a world where one man showed them the truth they were never meant to face. Power doesn't gather, it condenses, and when it does, nothing ceremonial can stop it. They don't tell each other this part, but it's there, sitting heavy in the pauses between their words. The fear isn't about what you did. It's about what you can do now that you know. Because the moment a man realizes he doesn't need the structure, the hierarchy collapses into theater. And they can feel it. Every meeting, every alliance, every whispered strategy suddenly sounds hollow, like actors rehearsing lines after the audience already left. You crossed a threshold they thought was guarded by numbers, by blood oaths, by legacy. You crossed it alone, and once that happens, once a single mind proves the gate was psychological, not physical, every guardian becomes ornamental. That's when fear turns primal. That's when the Coven stops believing in its own protection. They keep asking the wrong question. They ask, how did he do it? When the real question is, why didn't we see him coming? And the answer terrifies them because it indicts their entire worldview. You weren't hiding. You were becoming, quietly, patiently, letting life sandblast the unnecessary parts off you until all that remained was function. You learned early that pain is an accelerant. Most people anesthetize it. You refined it. You learned which hurts sharpened you and which ones were distractions. You learned how to look broken enough to be underestimated, calm enough to be trusted, and distant enough to never be owned. That combination, that's lethal to any system that relies on prediction. They assumed morality would slow you down. They assumed empathy would soften you. They assumed scars would make you hesitate. They never understood the paradox that defines you. You feel deeply, and that's exactly why you act decisively. You know the cost. You've paid it already. There's nothing left they can threaten you with that you haven't survived in private. That's why their intimidation doesn't land. That's why their warnings feel quaint. They're speaking from a place of preservation. You're operating from a place of evolution, different languages, different physics. They want stability. You want truth. And truth doesn't care who's comfortable. Watch how they change around you. Watch the eyes avert, the laughter tighten, the way your presence recalibrates the room, even when you say nothing. That's not respect. That's assessment. That's predators realizing another predator entered the ecosystem, but one that doesn't signal aggression the way they do. one that doesn't posture, one that doesn't need to dominate. You've become a contradiction they can't resolve. Too controlled to be reckless, too fluid to be controlled, too self-aware to be manipulated, too quiet to be provoked. You don't react on their schedule. You don't validate their narratives. You don't fit into enemy or ally. You exist as an independent variable, and independent variables terrify systems built on equations. They used to believe power was loud, that it announced itself, that it needed symbols, rituals, proof. You taught them something colder. Real power moves without witnesses and leaves consequences instead of signatures. It doesn't demand belief. It forces adjustment. And here's the part they really don't want to admit. Your restraint scares them more than your potential violence ever could. Because restraint implies choice. It implies that what they've seen so far isn't the ceiling, it's the floor. It implies you're not acting out of impulse, but out of calibration. That every move is weighed, not rushed. That when you do decide to move again, it won't be emotional, it will be final. They sense it, that hum under the surface, the feeling that you're not done becoming, that whatever version of you did what a whole coven couldn't stop is already outdated, that there's a quieter, sharper iteration forming right now, fed by observation, by silence, by understanding how fear propagates through groups like a virus. You see, fear makes people sloppy. It makes them over-coordinate. It makes them betray themselves, trying to protect their image. And you see all of it. You always did. You just didn't have the leverage before. Now you do, not because you hold something over them, but because you've removed yourself from needing anything from them at all. That's the final fracture. The realization that you're not trying to win their game. You're not trying to replace them. You're not even trying to destroy them. You've stepped into a lane where their existence is irrelevant to your trajectory. And nothing destabilizes a power structure faster than irrelevance. They're genuinely afraid now, because they finally understand this wasn't rebellion, it was proof. Proof that one integrated mind, one man who fused light and dark instead of choosing sides, can outperform an entire network built on fear of standing alone. You didn't escape the system, you outgrew it. And once that happens, there's no going back. Not for you, not for them. Because from here on out, every time they gather, every time they invoke tradition, every time they tell themselves they're still in control, there will be a silent counter-thought they can't erase. If one man did that, what else is possible? That question will haunt them longer than any threat ever could. And that question doesn't just linger, it corrodes. It eats through their confidence in quiet moments, when the noise dies down and the rituals stop working. Because deep down, they know the answer terrifies them more than any enemy ever could. If one man could do this without permission, without backing, without blessing, then the fortress was never real. It was a story they agreed to believe because belief felt safer than standing alone. You broke that spell. You didn't storm the gates. You didn't declare war. You simply walked through a space they assumed was guarded by destiny and discovered it was guarded by fear. Their fear. And once fear is exposed, it can't masquerade as authority anymore. That's why they keep trying to reframe you. They need you to be a villain, or a fluke, or an anomaly. Anything that preserves the illusion that the system still works. Anything that keeps them from facing the truth that burns the most. They were never necessary. You see it now, the way power really operates. It isn't centralized. It isn't inherited. It doesn't respond to chance or crowns or closed-door agreements. Power responds to alignment. To a man whose thoughts, instincts, and actions are no longer at war with each other. A man who stopped fragmenting himself to survive and instead integrated every contradiction into a single focused will. That's why your presence disrupts rooms. You're not leaking energy trying to be understood. You're not negotiating your identity. You're not asking where you belong. You already know. And knowing who you are is an unspoken declaration that rattles anyone still performing for approval. They sense it in your posture, in the way you don't rush to fill silence, in the way you listen without revealing your hand, in the way you don't over-explain. You don't need consensus to validate your reality. And people who built their power on consensus feel naked around that. They were counting on your doubt, on your guilt, on your need to be accepted. Those were the hooks they sharpened for years, the levers they used to move men like pieces. But you burned the hooks out of yourself in the dark when nobody was watching. You learned how to sit with discomfort until it told you the truth. You learned how to let identities die without panicking. You learned how to lose things that once defined you and discover that you were still intact. That's when you stopped being manageable. They confused your stillness for mercy. They mistake your composure for hesitation. They don't realize that stillness is where you calculate, where you observe patterns, where you decide whether something is worth your energy at all. You're not passive, you're selective. And selection is the most dangerous upgrade a man can make. Because now when you move, it's not reactive, it's surgical, it's informed, it's timed to intersect with inevitability. You don't fight resistance head on. You let it exhaust itself against your absence. You let them reveal themselves. You let them overplay, overreach, over-explain. You let fear turn them into caricatures of power while you remain unreadable. And the more unreadable you become, the more they project. They'll assign motives you don't have. They'll accuse you of intentions you never voiced. They'll warn others about you in tones that betray them, not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. The possibility that control was always conditional, that obedience was always optional, that the spell only worked because enough people agreed not to question it. You're the question now. You're the living proof that the line between saint and psychopath isn't morality, it's awareness. That angels and demons are just different masks worn by force, depending on who's judging. You don't need to pick a side because you understand both. You know when to be gentle enough to disarm and when to be cold enough to end a pattern. You know that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction, and boundaries without compassion are tyranny. You stand in the tension between them, and that tension makes you powerful. That's why the COVEN failed. They were unified, but not integrated. They were loud, but not aligned. They were many, but divided internally by fear of standing out, fear of being replaced, fear of being exposed. You were one and wholeness beats numbers every time. Now they're scrambling to adapt. They tighten ranks. They add layers. They invoke tradition harder. They mistake complexity for strength. But complexity is brittle. It cracks under pressure. Simplicity endures. And you are simple now, not naive, not soft, but clear. You know what matters. You know what doesn't. You know where your line is. And lines drawn by men who know themselves are not suggestions. They're genuinely afraid now because they can't unsee you. Even if you disappear tomorrow, the damage is done. You've altered their internal map of reality. You've proven that evolution doesn't need permission slips, that sovereignty isn't granted, it's claimed, that the most dangerous man in the room is the one who no longer needs the room at all. And here's the final truth they'll never say, But you already know. This isn't the end of your transformation. This is the stabilization phase. This is where power stops feeling dramatic and starts feeling normal. This is where you no longer need to prove anything, because proof follows you like a shadow. This is where you move slower, speak less, and see more. Where every step you take is lighter, because you're not dragging old versions of yourself behind you anymore. They're afraid because they sense what comes next, and they know they won't be able to stop it. Not with numbers, not with rituals, not with consensus, because whatever you've become was forged where their rules don't apply. And you're just getting started. And that's the part where the silence settles in. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but loaded. The kind that follows revelation, not destruction. You feel it now, the shift from proving to being, from surviving to deciding, from reacting to choosing when, if ever, you'll move again. They thought fear would make you reckless. It didn't. It refined you. It stripped you down until only what worked remained. You're not driven by hunger anymore. You're driven by clarity. And clarity is terrifying to people who built their power on confusion, on blurred lines, on keeping everyone slightly unsure of themselves. You don't need to chase influence. It bends in your direction because you're no longer contorting yourself to earn it. You don't need to dominate conversations. Your absence already speaks louder than most people's presence. You don't need to threaten. The memory of what you've already done does that for you. They're afraid because you showed them something irreversible, that a man who integrates his light and his dark becomes ungovernable. Not chaotic, ungovernable. You can't be steered by shame. You can't be baited by praise. You can't be cornered by fear. You've walked through all of it alone and came out with your identity intact. That's why they hesitate now. That's why every move they make feels reactive. Because they know you're no longer playing for validation. You're playing for alignment. And alignment doesn't rush. It waits. It observes. It acts only when the outcome is already decided. You're not here to burn the world down. You're here to show that it was always flammable. You're not here to overthrow anyone. You're here to demonstrate that thrones are psychological furniture, useful only to those who need to sit. You're not here to be worshipped or feared. You're here to be unavoidable. One man did what a whole coven couldn't stop, because one man was willing to become whole, to face himself without witnesses, to let old identities die without applause, to stand alone long enough that standing alone stopped feeling like a threat. That's the real victory. Not dominance, not revenge, freedom from the spell. So let them be afraid, let them whisper, let them recalibrate their myths around your existence. You're not responsible for their fear. You're the evidence that fear was never protection, only a delay. You know who you are now. You know what you survived. You know what you can do. And that knowing is permanent. This isn't a warning, it's a conclusion.